I have been wanting to do a podcast in regards to bullying, suicides, suicide awareness. We recently had a situation here in Louisville where a 10-year-old took his own life, and from all indications it was due to bullying. Now, he had a health medical issue, right? This is where he had the bag,
colostomy.
Yeah. And I know people listening, the parents now they're suing the school, or not school, Jefferson County school system. So this situation for this family is definitely ongoing. But again, in wanting to talk about this thing, to me the whole nonsense of bullying, how it all really address it, bring it up, and then also talk about suicide awareness and how people who are in that state of mind can reach out and talk about get the help too, and then tie it all into with how social media, it all kind of, we're in a different age right now. When you got something like bullying online, which you don't have to be face to face. It doesn't even be physical, but online bullying could lead to someone taking their life. So reached out to a couple of my friends. They're here. We're going to get their stories, who they are, and then we're going to go deep into it. Start with you, Steve. Give us your background. What are you all about?
I'm a child and adolescent psychologist. Work at Spalding University and teach and train psychologists. Been in the field for a long time. Yep.
Gotcha. Jamin, you're...
Yeah, I come from the world of professional wrestling. It was like my first love. I made those dreams come true. Got out of wrestling a little bit to pursue other passions, which I do personal development. I work with people on themselves, helping them to understand themselves, using conversation as a focusing tool to help them. And now, as of recently, getting more involved with schools and helping kids on a larger level.
Gotcha. Well, let's start with the situation with the 10-year-old, the whole family. 10-year-old again took his life, a result of bullying. You've been on some local media to discuss it. Let's pick up your discussion. How did this all connect with you?
Yeah, I mean it's unbelievably tragic. I mean, suicide is always tragic, and always feels like something that's avoidable. It's something that is just, there's ripples of pain, and my heart goes out to the family. I can't even put myself into what that must be like for that family to be suffering from it. I will say that after a decade or two of declining suicide rates, the trend has been reversing, and we are seeing suicide on the uptick, which is, I think, really concerning. It should concern all of us.
Give me a timeline. At what point, or a window of when it was starting to decline?
So more or less, it started to rise again about 8-10 years ago.
Okay.
And there were a couple of groups where you saw it rising more so than others. College students was one group that you saw sort of increasing rates of suicide in that population. So young adults or older adolescents. You started to see it in adolescents, and really the new trend. And I do want to say that very young child suicide is rare, remains very rare. This is not a thing that happens often, and that doesn't decrease the pain and loss for that family. But young kids committing suicide or attempting suicide is an area that's drastically increasing, even though it's still rare. And when you drill down and start to look at those cases, and I think there's been about 4,500 suicides of kids between the ages of about 6 and 12.
That's nationally. Okay.
Yeah, so that's again, it's a small number, but it's talk about a life being snuffed out way too young. It's just heartbreaking. When you look at the kids who, those young kids who commit suicide, what you normally see, what is typical to see, is some element of either bullying, that is a common characteristic, or exposure or humiliation. And humiliation is it's not a new dynamic for kids in school settings. I think there's a little bit of dynamite with social media on that piece.
Yeah.
And one other thing we have noticed when you look at the very young kids who have committed suicide, African Americans make up about 12% of the population. They're making up about 36% of young children who commit suicide. And that should get everybody's attention and wonder what in the world is going on with that.
Well, when this particular child, you mentioned, or we discussed, he had a medical issue. So clearly, probably a situation where, kids are, I hate to say that kids being kids, where, making fun of, humiliating. If this is happening at school, is the school I'm thinking yes, they should be aware of it, but are they aware of it? Is that something where they should be detecting or seeing, or is this where, because I'm guessing, and maybe you know this, was the child, did he share the thing with his family, his mom, parents, whatever, that what he was going through at school? Do you know if that was being shared?
I'm not sure.
So I guess where I'm going is that if it was shared, did someone from the family address it with the school?
Yeah.
So
honestly, I don't know enough about the case to really speak,
All right.
speak to it.
Jump in.
No, from being a kid who was bullied growing up, I was in special education classes. I struggled academically my whole entire school career. I know when I was being bullied, I certainly didn't say anything.
Right.
I felt like if I said something, it might get worse, or if that kid found out, even if
give me an age. How old are you?
Oh boy, Kevin. For me, it was like, it seems like it was so early, first grade.
So you were pre-10? So you're talking 5, 6, 7 years old then.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
I mean, all the time. I got in fights over it. Over trying to defend myself, and I'd be quiet. I would, even walking away. There was things that I talked to my mom about it. I talked to her about a lot of things, but things have changed so much, and I don't know if we were coming from a fearful mindset back then, and but now with social media, it's like everything's out in the air now. But I would just suggest that maybe, I don't know the kid's situation, Sevens, I don't know his situation, but I just wonder if he was just afraid, and I think there was something about it. He got picked on the school bus. Or was that the case? So I mean, does that go to the school bus, the person who's, and then they hear a bunch of stuff all day anyway? So how do they know how serious it is? And it's those nuances are so hard to detect, Do
they? I'm curious. Does the school system train? I don't know if you're saying no, they don't, or you don't know, or
train
the teachers or bus drivers, people in an authoritative state, to identify, and if it's someone addresses it with them, say the kid went up to the bus driver, whatever, so-and-so's picking on me. I mean, is there a protocol that you know of that they're like?
I'm ignorant to that. If there is, I'm not too sure, but it seems like more than ever now, it's becoming necessary for all of us as humans is to evolve and to be able to look at these things and take them seriously.
I would think it's safe to say that this being a 10-year-old child, I haven't heard. I've heard of teenagers taking their lives here in town, but a child that young, this probably should be a game changer for the school system and everybody on how they identify this, and then what are the steps to take to try to keep this from happening again.
Yeah, I mean, and from my perspective, from just being a guy who has, throughout the years, even through my wrestling career, I'd go to schools and I would do assemblies. And I was talking to Steve about this before the show. I just felt like I would do these assemblies, and I felt like they weren't really walking away with value. And I could feel it. And the teachers would be like, "Oh, great job," and everyone's great job. But I could feel that the kids weren't feeling it. Right. And when you're looking at an audience, and you see if they're engaged or if they're not. Right. And to hit a few kids here and there is great, but like, how can you hit more kids? And from my perspective and what I've seen to work thus far, I've been doing this for the last year now. I've been going to schools, and instead of doing assemblies, I'm focusing on doing smaller groups and just literally talking about life, no matter what the cases are. Helping them understand their values, helping them understand what's important to them, looking for creative ways to understand their values. It's like, if you want to be a basketball player, is it because you want to be a star, or is it because you actually value connection? Right. And getting kids to understand their values on a deeper level from that sense. And I'm finding that to be very beneficial for them, because they're emptying the well. I feel like they're getting all their stuff out, and when one kid sees that one kid's talking, that kid wants to speak up. Right. And then that kid wants to speak up. So I have seen positive effects from this community approach right now. I don't know if it's the approach, but as of right now, this is something that is exciting me, because a lot of kids they're being told what to do all day, and then their phones are telling them what to do all day, but they're not really getting the chance to unravel, maybe because there's certain questions not being asked, right? So it's interesting to see how that's unraveling.
Jump in.
Yeah, I think I think the schools are paying attention to this issue. I don't think that this is this terrible thing that happened as the result of systems in schools and teachers and people not caring. I think there's been an intentionality in most school districts in Jefferson County, for sure, to increase the knowledge and awareness of the people who work in the schools, to identify. I think there's a lot of efforts that are made on the part of bringing the kids into these conversations and talking about this. I don't remember growing up ever going to anything that talked about suicide in school. That was not talked about, and it is now. So I think when we're talking about this increase in suicide rates and suicide attempt rates, we're not talking about systems that have stopped caring, and I think we need to look elsewhere to maybe understand that. And
what's elsewhere?
I think one of the key things that I see that may be a big contributor are the problems in accessing mental health care. We have not, for example, in Jefferson County, we used to have what's called 7 counties. It's now called Centerstone. It's our community mental health system. And the community mental health systems were started by John F. Kennedy. It was a Kennedy administration. They've been around a long, long time. And Centerstone, previously 7 counties, they have not seen increases in their funding in like 25 years.
It's funny you said that. That was my daughter that just walked up, and she's going to school for behavioral therapy, and she's affiliated with, I guess now it's Centerstone.
Now Centerstone?
She was doing stuff with 7 counties. So,
okay.
So yeah, all right. It's kind of now all coming full circle for me.
Yeah. So I think access is a real problem, and for families that can't get to mental health help, the barriers are sometimes financial, sometimes transportation, sometimes they're very practical, sometimes it has to do with knowledge, not really knowing that there's effective interventions out there and there's help out there.
To have this accessible, available, is one thing, but then are you relying on a 10-year-old or a 7-year-old to speak up and say, I need help?
Right. No, and that's an important question. Yeah. So how do we know?
Right.
And there's really or three-pronged approach. We need to make an investment. This is my opinion, and I'm not alone in this. We need to make an investment in our primary schools And New Albany just got a wonderful grant, and they're putting mental health professionals in every school. There is a piece of legislation in Frankfurt right now, House Bill 1. I think it's become Senate Bill 1. I think it has been pared down, but initially had proposed statewide, making a commitment to mental health professionals in every school, at least access. So I think it's really important for kids who are clearly identified as having those problems to have access to somebody who can assess them, who can develop a treatment plan for them, who can help them. When it's in primary school, you can talk about small interventions making long-term positive kinds of changes for kids. So that's one piece. The other piece, though, has to do with increasing the strength of our school system and the connectedness that kids feel in school. And there's a growing literature in psychology and education that's really found this thing called belongingness as a hugely important factor in terms of what happens in schools. It's been linked to when you can increase belongingness, that sense of belongingness kids have in their school, you decrease aggression in the school, you decrease out-of-school suspension, you increase happiness, and you actually increase learning outcomes. Like a whole host of really important things happen when you target belongingness. And for 7, I think we can maybe look at that case and wonder a little bit out loud, like, did he feel that sense of belongingness in that school?
One of the proverbial statements people tend to make is that things start at home.
Yeah.
And without getting too political here, our country right now is as divisive. We're as divided as we've been in years. I do think we have an administration who has enabled, a certain base to, not be as welcoming to the other ethnic group or color, whatever, gender, I can't help to think that, you got kids, a lot of it is learned behavior to me. And you hear it, if the kid is at home, hearing the way the parents are talking about certain people, especially at that young age, then all they're doing is just taking it to school. That black kid that my parents clearly don't care for, his people, there must be something, my parents must be right, so why do I need to be nice or welcoming to that person? Help me with this. Am I off base here?
I think you're absolutely right. I think the environment can certainly, no matter where you're at, I was talking to him too before, like I was in the wrestling business. There was a mindset I took upon. I didn't even understand it took over me though until I got out of the wrestling industry. So there was this type of way of thinking, even little bullying aspects too. And me, like from a political standpoint in the business, it's like we'd bully people to get a certain spot or whatever. It's an interesting. It's interesting how you go through it, and if you don't have that self-awareness, or if no one's introducing it to you, and I think that's what we're kind of like always touching on here. It's if you don't know or if you don't have the right resources, and I could sit here and talk and say I'm fortunate enough to have seen that and be able to make changes in my life that were necessary, but not everybody has that access, like Steve was saying, and that's what's challenging. On the flip side, as I look at all of this, my life, just sitting here with you guys right now, I can't help but feel like whatever life's throwing at us is something we need to see in order to evolve. So I feel like the pendulum is swinging, if you want to call that energetically, spiritually, whatever. I feel like the reason why we see these things that are not so great, but I feel like it's also educating you to what not to be. I feel like, not to get too political either, but through what we've seen in this administration. It's also brought people together in a lot of weird ways too. You know, it definitely is divided, but from my perspective, I feel like it has brought good artists out. I feel like it has brought this and vinegar in people that also could inspire good things too. And it's a tough balance.
It has enabled both the people who, hate and love, in a sense. I mean, you've got people who want to make things better. They're stepping up. They're trying their best to come up and I don't know, just conversation. To me, I'm not a Trump guy, but unfortunately, we're in a day and age where the fact that I'm not seeing eye to eye with someone on Trump basically shuts down any type of dialogue that we could have nine other things we are so gung ho about. But that one thing right now, it's that seems to be a very divisive thing. And am I out of line here I'm curious if the kids have been identified who were these bullies to 7, and if so, I would be interested to have a conversation with their parents to see what's in that kid's life that would have felt that it was okay, cool to pick on, bully, And
that's hard to detect.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
Because there's some good parents out there where their kids are sometimes a particular way, and I've just seen it in my personal life, just like people I know, and their kids are sometimes just out of control. You know what I mean? In certain ways, and I'm not justifying it. It's just there's so many nuances, especially, and we touched on it a little bit, but social media.
So let's go there.
We think it's okay to judge people, or we put all these expectations on these things, and shit, man, excuse my language, but like we're putting so much pressure on ourselves for the opinion of someone else's, so we don't get judged, and it's this weird protection thing. And Steve, I'd love to hear your
I think you're right. I think that another dynamic that happens in social media is because it connects us with like-minded people, and there's a danger in being constantly connected to like-minded people. And I can go on social media, I can get on the internet, and I can validate any particular opinion I might have. I can find other people who share it. I can find rationales for it. And I think what that has done is it's create polarization. If all we hear is people with the same ideas that we have, I think it moves us apart. And that's not to say that people aren't going to have different opinions, but I think that's part of what's happened. And I see what's happened in politics is more of a symptom of that, as opposed to not necessarily a cause of those things. That what we see happening in Washington is a reflection of what's happening in Des Moines, what's happening in Louisville, and those kinds of places. So there's a lot of good that comes from social media, and there's a lot of peril. And I think one of the pieces that bears some like discussion, and I'm curious about, since you go into the high schools, your experience with this, but there's this these findings where they're correlating time spent on social media with depression in adolescents, and that is not the finding you get when you look at social media use in older people. Like, older people are actually finding social media to be a way to stay connected. And you're not finding it with really young people, like younger kids with social media. Doesn't seem to be a problem. But adolescents, like the time spent on social media is correlated with depression.
When you're a kid, there's a lot of, and for us, I guess, we didn't come up with that technology. So there was a lot of alone time and a lot of thinking. And I think that's what scares people the most, is themselves. And just to kind of go off of what you're saying there, is that what you're saying? The idea of they go to this because it's a way to avoid something else.
Yeah.
Is even those minute things, those little things throughout the day.
Absolutely. So I think it's an avoidance strategy for some kids. I also think that social media. There's a I can't remember her name. She's I think might be a social work person, but she's talked about. There's a TED Talk you can Google called "Together Alone," and in "Together Alone" she talks about the fact that social media barely but does meet our needs for social affiliation. Humans have that. It's innate. We're social creatures. And so we can get that need met through social media, but just barely. And it's not even real. It's just the very, like, it's a smoke, it's not quite, getting your hands around something real. And that has started, I think, to take the place of authentic and deep relationships. And I think that authentic and deep relationships is a protective factor. Protects kids from becoming bullies. It protects kids from having negative mood. I think it helps kids build resilience around things that go on in their life. All those pieces. So those are just some disconnect thoughts.
The older kids or adults who are on social media that are being harassed, bullied, they have the mindset to report it or block, whatever. But unfortunately, and I don't know if this was the case with 7, but 10 years old, I could see it. Definitely 10-year-old kids. I've got a 6-year-old grandson, and they're on the smartphone. Mama is doing her due diligence. I guess my point is that at that age, they're already starting to, socialize with, the cyberspace, with, non-physical people who will say things, do things, post things that kids, they can't comprehend. And I'm at a loss.
And that's I think that's why that connection's so important. That just to make them feel something for once.
But again, that goes back to home, right? I mean,
always.
It puts. I mean, again, I hate to kind of trash the home front or parents. But,
and that's a war we don't know how to win yet because we can't prevent it.
You can't prevent it. You can't. But is it? I don't know. Is there? Let's go back to if they identify the kids involved and through, I don't know, is law, if this may be hypothetical, but just entertain me here. You got a lawsuit, clearly got a lawsuit with the school. I'm thinking if they're suing the school, assuming they don't settle, I'm kind of thinking they're probably going to wind up settling. But if it goes through a process, there should be a conversation or interview or whatever with potentially the kids involved. Would that be fair to say? Or
I mean, yeah.
I think any conversation,
which to me would have to require the parent there. So in that conversation, if that ever was to happen, does the parents get called out? Because I think in conversations you might be able to detect, the mindset of a parent that gets, again, where this child learns this behavior. I mean, how much can you potentially, put on the parents?
It's always an interesting approach because parents can get very defensive. So I think if the conversation ever does come up with the parents and the kids, to have a lot of empathy there too, and to hear their sides, and also to inspire them through your actions when you're asking the question, and to show them that you do care, and not as so much as an attack. I know it sounds like whatever, but I think how we approach things are so important too. Sometimes we're so ready to go to war too, and I think that can cause just so much more stress on people because they may or may not know how to handle those situations.
Right.
And but yeah, the challenge in that is so grand.
Yeah, I really appreciate that point, and the need for us to to dig deep for our own compassion towards all those impacted. I think it's a natural human inclination to look for a why and a cause and a failure, and that if we were able to find something, if the school system knew and didn't act, for example, which I have no knowledge of that being the case or not, that might mean if we can do that, schools need to do this, and then this will never happen again, and we can feel like something's in our control that wasn't in our control. So I think the inclination to look for blame in these kind of cases is pretty powerful, and we need to be careful about that.
Fair point. But you did touch on the fact that the age, it's trending up. The younger
that we're seeing it, again, small, it's a low base rate kind of a problem, but it is clearly growing, and
So what's the driving? Why is it driving?
I mean, I think it has to do with a decreased access to mental health care, and it's not just for the kids. Okay, so you had talked, I think very effectively about kids are embedded in families, right? Yeah. What about family mental health issues? I mean, there are generational family mental health issues, and parents who have untreated mental health concerns are very likely to transmit their mental health problems to their kids, either through this plain old genes or through the environment that's created for those kids. Right. So I think it's important that we find ways of, finding where the barriers are, reducing those particular barriers. There's really a neat movement nationwide. It's happening here in Louisville. I don't know if you all have heard about it in terms of creating trauma-informed schools. Does that ring a bell for?
No, I've not heard.
I'm not familiar with it.
So trauma-informed schools concept is that schools need to be a place where there is knowledge and help to address issues of trauma. And trauma we used to talk about with the big T. Trauma was, you saw somebody killed or you saw a terrible motor vehicle accident. And we've come to understand that trauma with a little t can be very, very damaging. Exposure over a long period of time.
First responders.
I've heard. There's a whole literature on first responders in terms of them being vicariously traumatized.
Yeah, isn't that still a form of post-traumatic?
They can.
Yeah.
You'll see that in first responders.
Yeah.
But the idea of creating a trauma-informed school means we're going to use what we have in terms of knowledge. We're going to use knowledge of how to heal, knowledge of how to help, knowledge of how to build community. And we're going to create space where we're going to look out for each other. We're going to create space where we're going to identify kids who've been exposed to trauma and try to ameliorate that.
Is this something that is going to, is in the works?
It is. Yeah, Mayor Fisher's been talking about trauma-informed. He's really talking about a trauma-informed city and a trauma-informed community. And when he's talked about, Louisville being a compassionate city, this is when somebody says, well, what do you mean, Mayor? Or what's a compassionate city? He kind of is pointing to the fact of what he'd like to see Louisville become. And I think that those kinds of notions are really hopeful notions in terms of moving from where we've been to a place where we can increase everybody's sense of belonging, belonging to the school, belonging to the community, belonging to the neighborhood.
Yeah, man. That whole idea is so progressive. It's so forward thinking. If we can get on that, we can be ahead of the game.
That's another game changer right there.
It is a game changer. I was telling him before the thing too, it seems like it's a game changer if you can look someone in the eyes these days and shake their hand. Like it makes such a difference.
Put
in
the fucking phone down. Exactly.
Right there you go. Man, looking you in the eye. But that connection, it goes back to that connection and have them, it was going back to what you said too, Steve, like they want to feel that. They want to feel like they're being safe or they're listened to. that makes it made a difference in my life, being a kid who was picked on and bullied. I went home crying every day, but when my teachers showed me that care, or even a friend who didn't know me, who saw me sitting alone at the lunch table, was like, hey dude, you want me to sit with you? Oh yeah, sure. Like the way it would lift me up, it's just those little things, and if we can start on those little things, I just think a wave can happen.
I'm going to tell on myself here, and you probably haven't heard this. My mother's from Thailand, so she's you look at her, she looks Asian, she looks Thai. In elementary school, I remember one time she took me to school or whatever, and those kids saw her as someone different. Chink. I got picked on all the time, called all these Asian names. There were many times I would, school was close. I'm walking home and I'm crying all the way home. Tears would be okay. And I remember there was a time or two that I didn't have the tears dried up before I got home. And, my mom asked me, what's wrong? I couldn't tell her that you are, in a sense, causing me to get that's what I couldn't do. And so it just goes back to how
I think your listeners, to a person, like everyone listening can conjure some memory or set of memories of what that felt like, and how awful that was to be the recipient of those kinds of, teasing and bullying and all of that. And, you'd think that from experiencing those things, there'd be a generational shift. Like, that was terrible. I'm going to make sure that never happens again. I couldn't tell you whether there's less bullying now or more bullying now. I think it's less, honestly.
Do you?
Honestly, I do. And I also think that there is, we haven't talked about the strengths of this younger generation.
Well, let's go
Totally,
there.
let's get on that.
Let's go there because I do have an older generation thing I want to bring up, but let's stay with it. Go ahead.
But I think that the kids who are in high school and middle school now have some remarkable strengths as a group that amaze me. I think their ability to accept each other is different.
No, I think you're right. I think we're more diversified ever.
More diverse, and I think there's more examples in media of diverse role models for kids.
That's a good point.
I think maybe part of it is that the conversation about bullying is just more open now too. And I wish I did have data on that. It's a hard study to do, whether it was more or less. I do think it's different, and of course we didn't have Facebook bullying or Snapchat bullying or Instagram. Instagram's probably the worst one, actually. You're nodding over there.
Is it?
Yeah, because it's all visual, right? And so the idea
That's
of
true.
do it. And we're confronted with not just pictures of people we know, but the best pictures of people we know. This is they took 20 of them before they posted this one, and then they probably photo edited it. I'm hypothetical.
No, So you're right, and then you tie that into, what is social media? A lot of it is that self gratification where you got to get out there, put stuff out there for. It's some of it's hit and miss because you're putting stuff out there to feel like you want to get those likes and that cyber pat on the back, but you got people who will come back and start shaming you, and
What are some of the strengths you see, because you're in the schools?
Dude, the creativity, man. I actually get this sensation that they have this laziness to them, and I don't mean it in a negative way, but they have this laziness where they don't even want to go and bother and make someone feel bad either. They'll just stay quiet. Do you know what I'm saying? I get the sensation that they're I don't care, and I do. With kids, I think they're all at this neutral state of love immediately. I really do. I just think it's it just depends what they're around. But I don't know, the for example, I was saying to Steve earlier too, I was so astounded by how many kids were willing to raise their hand when I just started asking questions about one's life, and then the other one's well, I want to tell you about mine too. And this participation and this the confidence to to express themselves too, if they're taught that way, or if they know it's okay. I think that's a great thing. I know a lot of them harp on the video games and stuff like that, but it does build community in weird ways too. I notice, I'm not saying it's all great, but just like anything, there's got to be a balance to things. But once again, they're not afraid to connect if you show them that it's okay to connect. I just continue to see that, and I see that they're open to ideas, but they just got to get it in front of them. And I think that's the yin and the yang here with, like, it's so easy to be influenced one way, and it's so easy to be influenced another way.
Yeah.
And
That's fair.
Yeah.
Recently, in the news, in the last couple of days, there was the girlfriend of the guy who committed suicide, where she basically talked him into it via text, and she's going to prison for this. I don't know how long. It's not a crazy. It's maybe 2 or 3 years.
Yeah.
So again, this one kind of just. I guess I don't. You have to, I guess, try to understand the mindset of the guy, because my understanding is that he brought it up in a text that this is what he was going to do, and I don't know all the logistics, but basically her continued response was talking him into just do it. Help me understand that scenario.
I'm kind of of two minds of that particular piece. And I'm not, don't know too much about that other than what I read, just a few paragraphs here and there. I do think, though, that we might want to talk about what to do if we think that somebody is contemplating suicide. I think that'd be an important point to hit today.
It's what's even more, I guess, what really sickens me the most is someone who didn't have the compassion to help this person.
No, kind of the opposite of compassion. Yeah.
So,
and whether I don't know if you should go to prison because you're a horrible human being, and you do something like that, but I think it's illustrative in terms of there's a few things in that case that are important. And one is that people who are thinking of hurting themselves will often, almost, not always, but almost always, give some sort of clues that they're contemplating that. And that reflects ambivalence. It is a very, it's a very common experience for folks who are contemplating suicide to be highly ambivalent about it. And if you care about somebody, or you know somebody, or you cross paths with somebody, and that kind of triggers your sense of concern, like, I'm kind of wondering if this is what's going on. Step one is to ask that person, to approach that person, and ask them, are you thinking of hurting yourself? Are you considering suicide? And some people are afraid to ask that question because they're worried they're going to be wrong and the person's going to be mad because you asked that question.
Sure.
Some people are worried that, that's going to give them an idea, like that hadn't occurred to them. And really neither of those things should carry the day.
I pulled up this article. This actually went down or happened in July of 2014.
Oh, it's a long time ago.
The female, the girlfriend, or I guess, the girlfriend was 17 at the time. So she's 22 now. She's serving a 15-month prison sentence for involuntary manslaughter. So.
Wow.
Have a good one.
You as well.
So let's say somebody says yes to the question, like, are you thinking of hurting yourself? And the person says, I've been having those thoughts. The next step is really going to be one that's around, like, action. And if you're not comfortable, what you really want to do is you want to persuade that individual to seek help. And not just with the, like, hey, I think you should go, tell somebody. But, like, right in that moment, like, let's do something together.
Yeah.
And for anyone who's listening right now, like, if you don't mind, like, get a piece of paper right now, or better yet, take out your cell phone right now. Take out your cell phone and go to your contacts in your cell phone and put suicide hotline in your contacts right this moment.
Yeah.
Go ahead and do it. Put suicide hotline. I'll give you a second. And then enter 1-800-273-8255.
Because it might not be for you. It could be.
Right.
For free,
Like
but
maybe I'm
okay.
not, but I'm with you, and I don't know what to do. Like
Right.
all I know is like I'm worried about you, and you've just told me, yeah, like there's something to it.
I'm curious. Can I call that hotline for a friend?
Yeah.
Like I can do
You
it. too.
can.
I don't have to be the.
Correct.
Okay.
So like you don't know what to do, and you're like, I think I'm worried. I don't call that hotline, and they will. And it's a national hotline, but they have a list of local resources in every
Okay.
community.
So they'll give me. Okay.
Yeah, and if they, they'll, if your friend's right there, hand them the phone, and they can do what they do there. If there's anybody local who's hurting and who's or knows somebody who's hurting and they're wondering where help can be, there's some great resources in our community. There are resources that don't cost anything. There are resources that are very low cost. If you have insurance, there's more options. Centerstone is an option for folks with or without insurance. Spalding University has a mental health clinic. Number for the mental health clinic at Spalding is 792-7011. You can also call, if it's really acute, call 911. They know how to deal with those things too.
That's awesome.
So those are just a couple of, practical things that I want to make sure that we touched on today as we're sort of having a real broad discussion.
And Steve, I love the fact that you really brought up the fact, like, hey, instead of just giving them some advice, hey, go talk to somebody, or you should probably call this, like, to do it with them. I really love that. Because they feel that too, they feel that.
Yeah, like I'm not going anywhere till like,
Exactly.
like something's going to happen. So like I'm so worried about you. Like, we're not going home till I can feel okay.
I love it.
Yeah.
I love that.
You can even make it about you. Like,
Yeah.
hey, I'm not comfortable. Like this is about me now, and I'm not comfortable leaving you alone. I think that's real important. And I think that there is help out there, like for folks that are hurting and thinking that like this is it, like this is the way I'm gonna feel for the rest of my life. I feel like shit right now. Nothing's gonna get better. I'm feeling hopeless. I get that, but those are feelings.
Yeah, but those people also have to truly come to terms with the fact that they need help. That that there is an issue.
Yeah.
And whether I don't know if it's ego or pride, whatever, that they don't want to go there.
I think it's stigma too. Right?
There you go. Yeah.
So like, how many people are open about their own mental health condition or their mental health history or the fact that they're in therapy?
Right.
That's
a good point.
Nobody's like, mine's telling people that they went to they're getting their migraines treated, or hey, I'm pre-diabetic and I'm working on this. But like to say, hey, I'm in therapy for my depression. I'm working on my obsessive compulsive problems. I'm really anxious. I'm working on that it's better, but it still carries a bit of really unwarranted stigma. And my experience, I'm a psychologist, so of course I'm pro therapy. But my experience is that therapy is a tremendous gift that an individual can give themselves. And you can walk out of therapy not just with less symptoms and feeling less bad, but with a deeper understanding of yourself. And you can carry that with you to the rest of your life. So I'm making the case for therapy.
There you go. Real quick, programs. Anything ongoing or coming up? That you're involved?
So I am in the beginning stages of talking with JCPS and getting my program in. What I would like to do is come in for a week once a semester. So it's twice a year, where we get to work with the kids and talk about life. Just talk about stuff, your passions, why you're passionate, getting them to understand a different thing. I'm not big, even with the bullying and stuff, I'm not big on telling you what not to do as much as I'm trying to, I would love to just foster the conversation of how to love yourself more and how to love others, and look at that and stare at that a little bit more versus what not to do. I feel like whenever I was told not to do something.
Yeah, like DARE, the DARE program, right?
Oh, the DARE program. I love that you brought that up. Yeah.
They come in and say, don't do that. And all the kids are like, okay. And then they look like 15 months later, oh, wow, we've seen an increase in use of drugs.
Yeah.
So
That's interesting. And Steve, just from a psychology background, is there an explanation for why is that a human thing to like always go against that type of stuff when it's delivered in such a way? Or
I think it's a very typical adolescent thing, right? So
Okay.
adolescents are highly skeptical.
They don't want to be told.
They don't want.
Yeah.
They don't want to be told.
Yeah.
And being told has never worked for anything.
No.
It's just, and all of us who are adults telling adolescents, like, we forget. Every one of us was an adolescent, right? It didn't work. But I love how you're talking about connectedness, and you're talking about authenticity, and you're talking about love and compassion. Those are things that can stimulate some real important discussion among kids. Telling them what not to do when they're glassing their eyes over at you, like,
Right.
let's waste your time.
And that was going back to those assemblies I was telling you.
Yeah.
It's just what it felt like, man. It just felt like they're like, okay, this is a reason to be out of class versus something that they can get a value and something they can sink their teeth into and put practice to.
Yeah.
You can put practice to being vulnerable. I mean, I think even like vulnerability is such a freaking superpower. Like,
Wow.
I don't know. I feel like anytime I've been an asshole in my life and I had admitted it in some way, whether it be to my girlfriend, to my brother, to anyone, to a stranger, I can see how they change and I can see how I change and feeling all around. But there's something about sweeping stuff under the rug that, as you know, it just builds over time and it comes out sideways. It comes out in different ways. And
Yeah.
I think that vulnerability is certainly something that people should not be afraid to express. And hopefully over time that will become cool,
Yeah, and so here are three guys, right? And we're talking about vulnerability, and it's a uniquely, not uniquely, but it's a guy problem to be vulnerable, right? And so there's been some interesting discussion. If you watch social media, it's been a heated partisan discussion about the American Psychological Association's position on toxic masculinity, and if you dig down, you don't just hear that word and have that trigger you. If you dig down and figure out what that is, what it is a lot of things you're talking about. That men are not socialized to be allowed to express vulnerability, to express not being sure, and in lieu of that, we're given messages about how to express our masculinity through aggression, how to express our masculinity, through being having the sharpest tongue, and
Quickest wit.
Right,
and those
right.
pieces too. And I really welcome that conversation, about what it means to be a man in 2019. I think the conversation's been long in the works. It needs to happen.
Absolutely.
Again, share with us suicide prevention number, hotline.
So the number, in case you missed it and you got your phone out and you're like, dang it, I missed it. Here comes again. It's 1-800-273-8255. That number is for you. That number is for people you care about. That is a number that you can put in your family phone next time you're, get the family get together and you're sitting around the table. Your extended family get together, sitting around the table. You're hosting the derby party. I don't care where you are. Share that number, and you may end up saving a life.
Is there it's a national
number, but it's connected to local resources.
Yes, connected. But is there another avenue where you can go directly to a local, some facility or location you could just, physically go? Is that something you? I don't know. I guess you got to go to your doctor first. Or how
you could present in an emergency room.
Yeah.
And for somebody who's acutely suicidal, at Spalding University in our clinic, if somebody
well, that's where 911 would come in.
That's where 911 would come in, and that's where somebody, or if they're willing to go, immediately to, a University of Louisville hospital.
Self-enter.
Exactly. But I think that there are other resources. There's, I think the 211. Can you check that while we're? But by dialing 211, I believe it connects you to local resources in Louisville and New Albany, wherever you are listening. And I'm not sure if folks are listening from outside the region, but I think 211 works in a lot of different places. Is that the right number, Kevin?
It says there is a United Way 211 helpline.
There it is. And so United Way, that what they'll do is they'll connect you.
Okay.
So if you have somebody you love and you can talk to them about this is what's going on, they can give you a list of options. For kids who are struggling, a really great first conversation is with school counselors. Mm-hmm. And school counselors are, that's sort of their bread and butter. They know how to connect kids and families with services. So I think that's a piece also to be aware of.
But are the schools, and I guess it goes back to my earlier point, was are the schools being, I'm guessing they have to be trained or, brought this, to see this, to understand it, to facilitate it, to escalate it, whatever.
I think we can do more, honestly, too. Like, teachers and school personnel get some training. And I think they should get a lot of training. I think it's ground zero for where a lot of problems start and happen.
Definitely.
And I'm married to a teacher, and I'm cognizant of the fact that, we just keep piling on the things that need to happen,
Well, I know it's like,
in our schools. Yeah. And I think we really, as a society, as Louisvillians, as Americans, as whatever, as however we group ourselves, we really need to think about, what are we willing to invest in our future? Right. I think that's one way to think about it. And, mental health treatment is not expensive. And if you don't spend, you always end up paying for it if you don't spend money on it. So, if you don't find a way as a society to support mental health treatment, you're going to spend money on building prisons. You're going to spend money on medical care, of taking people who become sick at a very early age because of the cumulative effects of being exposed to stress. So we all pay. Right. And I think paying in such a way that creates a connected and happier society is the way to go.
Well, my friends, thank you.
Thank you
so much for coming on.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
I think, don't be surprised if we're talking about this down the road, because to me, it's an ongoing, it's not going to go away, unfortunately. That's the reality. And to me, these podcasts, having people on who, know what's going on and it can explain things, to me is a benefit to always, put the awareness out there. So again, thanks for hanging out with me.
Thanks for promoting it.
All right.
Thanks for this conversation. Thank you.
It's good to meet you, Jamie.
You too, man. You're awesome, dude.
You are awesome.
He's just like tearing it up with the information. I love that, man.
Together,
I love that.
You're both doing good.
It's that same path, man. Just thank you so much for your hard work and like everything you're doing. I just love your energy. I love both of your energy, and I appreciate, Kevin, that you're giving us a stage.
Well, to me,
to express this is so important.
This is a means to, gather people to, I'm not an expert, so I'm able to, find my resources and bring us together and talk about, in this case, a very serious situation. And again, thanks.
Thank
you, man.
And let's hope, the message continues to get pushed out there. People are talking to each other, caring a little more for each other. So,
cut the bullshit, folks.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks.